Today's episode of WCS Wild Audio is brought to you by our partners at Armatron. Armatron aims to bring awareness and inspire action to help protect marine ecosystems around the world, particularly as it pertains to single-use plastics. Armatron's ocean plastic watches, the Wave and Reef collections, are crafted from recycled ocean-bound plastic, blending eco-consciousness with impeccable design. Now, on to the episode.
Hello, I'm Hannah Kaplan, and this is the WCS Wild Audio Podcast, where you'll find reported audio stories covering the latest news and newsmakers from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Global Conservation Program, Zoos and Aquarium, and their many partners. We've got a great show today, so let's get to it. The world produces over 400 metric tons of plastic every year. Single-use plastics, from utensils and straws to soda bottles and packaging, enter our waste stream at an alarming rate. Less than 10% of all plastic is recycled. For Part 6 and the final episode of our summer series on marine conservation, we investigate the impact of plastic pollution on marine life and steps being taken to reduce single-use plastic consumption at WCS and its home in New York City. Nat Moss has this report.
It's a large and growing problem, and it's only getting worse.
Margaret Spring is the Chief Conservation and Science Officer at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. She's talking about plastic pollution in the ocean, which she says impacts surface level, mid-water dwelling, and bottom-dwelling marine life. The most obvious offenders are what she calls macroplastic, things like milk jugs and the plastic rings of soda cans.
I've seen large nets that have been abandoned. All those items can really entangle and choke marine animals that are swimming in those areas. The other way that animals are affected is that they ingest plastic, mistaking it for food, and that can cause them to starve. And I'm thinking about animals like sea turtles. Plastic bags, for example, look a lot like jellies. Any animal that's filtering or has its mouth open while it's swimming, like a whale, can ingest all sorts of plastic, whether it's large or small.
Smaller than the macroplastics are microplastics, which are less than 5 millimeters in size. And then there are even nanoplastics, which are even smaller.
We're finding that the animals retain the micro or nanoplastics, and then those accumulate through the food web. It's affecting the entire ecosystem. In fact, we call it the plastic biome or the plastosphere.
The good news, says Margaret, is that the world has begun to respond to the crisis of plastic pollution.
And we're really pleased that people are recognizing this very quickly, and the outcry from the public has been very strong.
An alliance of U.S.-based aquariums, the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, or ACP, heeded that call with a challenge to its members to begin reducing or eliminating single-use plastics in their operations. The Wildlife Conservation Society's New York Aquarium, along with the Monterey Bay Aquarium and several other ACP institutions, began looking for ways to tackle this important goal.
The group was wrestling with how to reduce single-use plastics and was looking for commitments from its members.
That's Niko Radjenovic, Vice President for Business Services at the Wildlife Conservation Society.
I worked with Edgar, our Executive Director for Business Operations, and Rich Spana, one of his two business leaders, to figure out a way for us to drop single-use plastic beverage bottles at the New York Aquarium. The New York Aquarium beverage program was completely plastic-free by the end of the year in 2018.
Greg describes the challenges they faced as they worked with the Coca-Cola Company to revise their beverage program to focus on aluminum cans and fountain drinks.
The infrastructure that we had was really geared towards single-serve disposable items. And so we had to get away from that. Coke ended up helping us to upgrade our fountain service program, and we installed new fountain service in everywhere we could.
At WCS, says Niko Radjenovic, the reduction of single-use plastics brought additional benefits to their bottom line.
This initiative has allowed us to be slightly more profitable than we were. So that's definitely a win-win. It's a win for conservation in terms of eliminating or reducing significantly single-use plastics. But financially, it's also been a win for us.
Greg and Niko say tens of thousands of plastic bottles have been avoided from the WCS waste stream.
From a beverage standpoint, last year, we sold 640,000 drinks.
I can add to say 70% of our mix prior to making these changes were plastic bottles. So with our previous program, 450,000 of them would have been plastic beverage bottles. Yep.
The Plastic Reduction Initiative, led by Niko and Greg, coincided with a grassroots effort conceived and successfully deployed by the WCS Public Affairs Division. Under the leadership of Executive Vice President John Calvelli, WCS's Give a Sip campaign engaged allies in the New York City Council and the accessibility community to push for a ban on plastic straws in the city's commercial establishments, with exceptions for certain individuals who relied on plastic for their health and safety. Chris Durosinmi, Director of Government and Community Affairs at WCS, describes the effort.
Through the campaign, we were able to engage bars, restaurants, hotels, cultural institutions, and the like, while simultaneously, engaging the public. It's no small feat when you're able to bring so many organizations, the public, to the table. And, council members listen. It just also happened to be an election year. And so I think striking while the iron was hot was pivotal in that regard.
The bill was approved by the council and signed into law in 2021. For Chris, the result was satisfying for what it achieved, but also on a more personal level.
With 2 young kids now, they're always watching. They can see an example as to no matter what your age, you can still make a difference. It's my, I say duty, but for lack of a better term, to lead them a world that is much more plastic free than when they were born.
At the request of Congress, Monterey Bay's Margaret Spring chaired a National Academy of Sciences panel to study the threat of plastic pollution in the U.S. and make recommendations on how to tackle the problem. This July, the Biden administration issued a plan based on the panel's expert guidance.
They said they were going to phase out the use of single-use plastics in federal purchasing by 2035. That's amazing. They've never said that before. So clearly it was getting through. Clearly people's voices are being heard. And so this is something that we as a community can continue to ask for and call for and not be satisfied until it's done.
For WCS Wild Audio, this is Nat Moss.
Today's episode was produced and reported by Nat Moss, with help from Hannah Kaplan and Dan Rosen. The WCS Wild Audio Podcast is a production of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Please join us next week for a new episode. And don't forget to rate or review the show wherever you get your podcast.